You ready? Should we start? Okay, guys, let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Sarah Hidalgo. I am a data manager and a data analyst at the Reach Institute. I've been at that role for 7 years, and the Reach Institute primarily does prevention and implementation research, and it is super awesome. Love it so much. Love the center. And today we're going to be talking about cleaning research data using SPSS Sytax. Very specific. I don't know why I gave it such a long name, but I did, and here we are. But something that I want to comment on before we get started is, even though this is going to be specific to research data and SPSS, the same rules apply for all kind of data and all kind of different syntax. This is just specifically, I'm going to be showing examples from SPSS. So the purpose of this presentation is to sell you on why you should use Sytax. I love it so much. And every time we have a new person come into our center, I give them a little tutorial on, hey, this is why you should do this. And it's super nerdy, but I just really care about this. When I started at Reach, my mentor, Jamie, who's right here, tried to convince me why I need to use Sytax rather than doing point and click or copy and paste, things like that. And I was really flustered when I started out. So I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to do the quickest thing possible. And that was copy and paste or manually manipulating things. And it took me a while to understand why she was trying to convince me to use Sytax. So ultimately, it saves you a lot of time. And it's an easier way of manipulating the data and just working together as a team. So I just want to convince you guys before you get into any potential hiccups to do it this way. Super fun. So I'd like to get a little bit of an idea. I'm good. I'd like to get a little idea of why you guys are here. How many of you already use Sytax of some kind? Me too. They work with me, so it's not surprising. They already know this all. They're my mentors. Okay. How many of you use SPSS in any form? SPSS. Okay. Can I ask, how do you guys use SPSS? Or do you use it mostly for data? You get the data sets, that kind of thing? Yeah. Okay. Then if you guys don't mind me asking, what do you hope to get out of this so that I can tailor it to kind of meet your guys' needs?
I'm a doctoral student, and so I'm only in my second semester, but I'm trying to keep dissertation in mind.
Oh, great.
And it's been a while since I've done anything SPSS since my master's, and so I was like, oh, this will be a good little refresher, maybe learn something new.
Oh,
tuck away for a year or so from now.
100% love that. I actually, when we get graduate students, a lot of times I do tutorials with them and I go over stuff for them because it does help you so much. And love that reason. It's great. Okay. So here's just a quick agenda of what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to go over some of the highlights of Sytax use, which are cleaning the data, its adaptability, documentation, scoring, and reporting. And then we will go over takeaways and Q&A. For the takeaways, I do want to mention that all of the syntax I'm showing you today, I will be sending you guys an actual Sytax file that has these examples so that it's a good starting point for you. Because with Sytax, we almost never write it. None of us have it memorized to just be able to type this all out. So a lot of times we copy and paste it, and it's just a good foundation for you guys. So that'll be a takeaway. You don't need to write down how to do any of this stuff I'm showing you. I'll send it to you so that you can just have it. It's great. Okay, so there is going to be a lot of stuff in my slides, and I'm sorry if any of it is overwhelming. Please feel free to ask me questions as we go. I'm just going to be showing you guys some examples on these slides of different ways that we can do each of these topics. We're starting with the data cleaning because that's kind of where you should start with Sytax, so it makes sense. I did just realize I don't have the presenter view, so I don't have my notes on what I'm supposed to say about each of these slides. So forgive me if I ramble, but I'll try not to. But so data cleaning is great in Sytax because it protects the integrity of your raw data. You're not writing over any of the data that you got originally. You're creating something new. And when you have it in Sytax, you're able to continually build on it so that you don't have to go back and remember what you did to manually change something. So it protects, or it helps eliminate a possibility of making errors, because we're humans. And if we're manually manipulating data, it's a lot more likely that we're going to make mistakes. So the first two examples that I have up here is recoding data, recoding variables. And as you can see, like the second example is doing reverse coding, which is something that's very common when you're doing research or interviews. There's a lot of measures that will do reverse coding. It would be very annoying to have to manually change these if you were going into the data and changing each one of these values. So it's wonderful that Sytax can easily do that for you. And again, if you have it in there, you never have to remember to change it again. It's wonderful. And then you have things like renaming the variable so that it's more clear what you're doing or what that variable represents and is capturing. And then adding variable labels, which again, just makes it easier for somebody who's getting the data from you to be able to interpret what they're looking at. Another data cleaning thing, there's really so much you can do with data cleaning, but this is another important one, dropping cases in the data. Highly recommend to do it in Sytax so that you don't accidentally drop somebody that you need or drop data that's important. It's easier to do it in Sytax so that you just consistently, as you're going, can make sure that you're dropping the case that you're supposed to. It also is beneficial that you can select out based on a criteria. So my bottom example is if you're doing like a randomized control trial, you would have a treatment and control group. If you just want to look at the data of the treatment cases, you can just do the simple Sytax right there. That's so easy. It's wonderful. And you don't have to do it yourself. And then it just saves you time. A lot of these things in Sytax, it saves you a lot of time when you do it this way, which is just great. You want that. Who wants to waste a bunch of time on other stuff? Oh, I just noticed that people are in the chat. Sorry, guys. I don't want to look at this.
Go back to it at Q&A.
Okay. Sorry for whoever's on the chat. I'm going to come back to you. It's weird because I can't see them. Okay. Ability to make changes throughout data collection. This is a wonderful thing that I recommend starting with a Sytax file when you're starting data collection or data cleaning so that you can constantly be adding on to it. And that just, again, prevents any mistakes or prevents you from forgetting something like, oh, I forgot this interviewer accidentally entered the wrong family ID. And that happened 2 years ago. Like if you don't put it in the data or in the Sytax, you might forget about stuff like that. So it's an ongoing document that you are continually building off of, which is just nice. It just continues to serve its purpose as you go. Another thing that could be really helpful, and this Sytax example that I have here is, this is calculating BMI based on data that we collect. And for a study that I worked on with CDC, that was an eligibility criteria and it was an outcome that we were looking at. So as we were going through the data, we wanted to continually keep an eye on BMI. And if you have the Sytax written out like that, you're not going to have to manually calculate on your own this variable every single time you run the data. And you're also going to make sure that you are doing it consistently the same way, because there are different ways that you can calculate this, but you want to make sure that you're using the same thing so that at the end, you have the same kind of numbers, because it would be confusing if you had different numbers or you reported different numbers at different times. So that is something that is really helpful with Sytax. And in general, that looks super crazy, which is fun. Scoring. Scoring data is, people love scored data. It's what we mostly use for data analytics and paper writing. So it's important. What I have here, I'm going to get this out of the way. What I have here is some of the most basic examples of how you score data. You create counts, means, and sums. And I don't remember what all I was going to say about that. Something about, I don't know. It's really nice. It's great. You wouldn't want. Oh yeah, go for it.
Are you putting, are you taking the raw data from an Excel sheet prior and adding a column in there before dumping it into SPSS? Because SPSS has two types of tabs. So are you doing this syntax prior or we're doing it in SPSS?
We're doing it in SPSS. Great question. Typically, if you were getting data from an Excel file, we would pull that Excel file into SPSS and then do the manipulation. And if you wanted the data to be exported back into Excel, because that's how you prefer to see it or how you do your reporting, then you can always save it out as an Excel as well. So you could do all your cleaning in SPSS. You don't even have to save it out as a SPSS data file. You could save it out as Excel if you wanted.
Okay.
But yeah, so great question.
Syntax for that. So.
There is syntax for that, yes. For how to save it into or bring it into SPSS and then how to save it out into Excel. Okay. So I don't actually have that example in my example file, but I can add that for you, okay? But yeah, that's a great question. What else was I going to say about scoring, guys?
It's a good place to document any changes.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that next. Yeah, thanks. We'll see if I think of anything else. It'll come up, but it's important. Okay, documentation. My boss is really big into documentation. She asks us constantly, not that boss, my other boss. She asks us constantly to make sure that we're doing documentation. One thing that's really helpful with us with Sytax is when you use Sytax, it is like documentation for other people if they're inheriting your data. Sometimes the data managers leave and you have to take over for somebody else. If you're able to have their Sytax file, you know what all data cleaning they've already done, and you know where the data is, you know where it's saved out, everything like that. So it's really helpful to have people with PhD students who a lot of times they'll fill the data manager role. A lot of times there will be turnover, obviously. And so they inherit data from other people or they pass it along to other people. And so it is really nice to have that resource of being able to use their Sytax so that they don't have to start from scratch. It also gives you historic knowledge from older projects. At our center, we have research projects that are 30 plus years old. And because of SPSS and our Sytax, we're able to go in and find where the data is. We can tell people what was done to the data. We can create new data sets based on it. It's a really helpful resource to be able to look at stuff that were studied a long time ago. So that has been a crucial thing for us. And then Sytax can also document why and when changes were made. So here's a fun example of that. So real quick, in SPSS to make notes, you just do a little star and then it's grayed out. We do this basically over every Sytax that we do. We write a little bit of what am I doing here as an explanation for whoever's gonna potentially look at the Sytax at another point. But in this particular case, this was kind of a more complicated variable that I created, and I needed to list a lot of reasons of why am I doing this. So usually we will have things like the date that we did it so that people know when it was created in case they have any questions about that. A lot of times I'll put like, oh, this was per Nancy, like I say who told me to make this change, which again is good in case people are like, why did you do this? And you can be like, because the boss told me to. And yeah, that's it. And then in this one also, I talk specifically about why we coded people's race the way that we did, because that's one that in research we're constantly trying to clean and figure out. So it's very helpful for just being able to explain it to people when they're looking at it, or when people have questions for you, you can just go to the Sytax and be able to interpret it that way. Reporting Sytax. Reporting is so fun because I'm assuming you guys are numbers people. That's why we're at the data conference, right? So this is the fun part where you get to see all the numbers from what you collected. It's wonderful. So I'm just going to show you some quick examples of Sytax to run different or to gather different reporting things and then the output, what it looks like. Sometimes people are intimidated by the output, but a lot of these ones that I'm showing you are pretty straightforward, pretty understandable. You can copy and paste these numbers into Excel or Word doc or emails, whatever it is that you need. It's not the prettiest thing, but it's still totally functional, which is good. So this example is running a frequency, which you would do a lot of times for just getting basic information on your data. This case, we're looking at how many caregivers were participating with the adolescent, and then we get information like the number for each of these categories, the total, the percent, cumulative percent, and everything like that. Obviously, a lot of other frequencies are going to be more than just 2 categories. They're going to be much longer and complicated. I chose a basic one because it's easier to look at. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about this with descriptives. Crosstabs are super fun because they show you, you can look at 2 variables or up to 3 variables. You can do 4 variables, but it's really complicated. I wouldn't recommend it. But you can look at all these different categories because first, depending on what you're studying, you might need to do something like this. In this example, I'm looking at schools by language. And for one of our studies, we wanted to have fairly balanced numbers for schools and language to make sure that we could fill our intervention groups based on that criteria. And so it was important for us to keep an eye on this kind of data as we were going along. This is descriptives, which for a lot of code books and things like that, you'll include the descriptive information. It gives you the number, min, max, mean, and standard deviation, but there are more things that you can add to this as well. But this is kind of just the basic for descriptives. In this one, we're looking at the descriptive of survey length. It can be really helpful to see potential outliers. So in this case, for total interview time, the maximum is over 7 hours. That's not accurate. I know that that's not accurate. So I can, for context, for this particular interview, it was supposed to be 1 hour to 1.5 hours. So that is substantially higher than what we would have expected to see. So what we would do with something like that is we would make that data missing because we don't want to skew the rest of the data to be something that isn't an accurate representation of how long the survey actually took to take. So it's really helpful to do things like descriptives and frequencies to get an idea of if there's outliers in your data or if there's like a funky N that doesn't make sense. In this case, there's 299 participants. In the first one, there was 301. But if we were looking at this and it was 201, that would be an indicator for me that something was going wrong. For some reason, 100 people didn't have survey length, and I would know that something was amiss either in the survey or in my data cleaning, that I was somehow getting rid of that information when I needed it. So these things are helpful for reporting for other people outside of your role, but it also can help with data cleaning and inform things like that. Do you guys have any questions right now? Have I been going too quick? Doing okay? Oh, it's already 10:20. Okay. Oh, wait, takeaways. We're doing great. Okay, so this is just kind of my last little spiel about why I think SPSS syntax and syntax in general is so helpful. It really helps you clean throughout data collection. It's easy way to do consistent reporting, helps you document changes made to the data, and can be easily built upon so that you don't have to start from scratch and neither does anybody else. And ultimately, it saves you a lot of time. As I mentioned, I will have a takeaway example file if you want it. I don't believe that I have the ability to send it to you guys through the conference. So I'll have to ask, but I have my email at the end. If you want to shoot me an email, I will send that to you so that you have that as a resource to start. Yes. Now, any questions? And I'm going to start looking at the chat too that I haven't been monitoring. Oh,
What were we gonna say about scoring?
You do?
Yeah, it's a good way to cross-check. So there are other places that you can do scoring if you're using like Qualtrics or some other platform.
Oh, that's what
But if things change with the scoring or the team decides to change something, that scoring would no longer be accurate. So it's a good place to cross-check if you have syntax and SPSS.
Yes, that's a great point. We do have studies where we are doing scoring in Qualtrics and RedCap. And the usefulness of that is so that you can do it immediately. If, say a clinician was meeting with somebody, they needed to have direct follow-up afterwards. But if you don't need to do that, it's a lot easier to do it in SPSS because you're able to control it a lot easier. It takes less time to do the scoring in SPSS than Qualtrics and REDCap. And it's easier to show people what you did as well, because there's not a super easy way to export the scoring from Qualtrics. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't a way to like export a syntax that would tell you how it was done because
Yeah.
all of it is mostly quick click. And
Yeah.
I think the same is true.
For REDCap.
Excuse me, I think the same is true for REDCap,
That's what I was
unless
thinking.
you're
as well.
using Java or something.
Yeah. And so it's just easier to explain to people what you're doing if you're using SPSS. Of course, still helpful to have the resource of Qualtrics and REDCap being able to score, but we would definitely recommend SPSS when you can. But we're also very partial to SPSS, so it's partially on us. Yeah, okay. What do you guys think? Do you have any questions about this? Let me get a drink while you guys think about it.
What are questions on each?
No, it was mostly people responding to why they were here.
Oh, okay.
So I was very late to that, but, oh, wait, maybe somebody did put a chat. Great question from Gemma. I don't use R. I have training in Python. And for me, I think it's kind of based on your comfortability, what you have more experience working in. Since I've spent 7.5 years working in SPSS, it's just the language that I know the best. But I think that all of those programs still have great, it's still the same kind of concept of why you want to use syntax over doing a point and click or a copy and paste method. So I still think that R and Python are preferable to not using anything. And for me, I'm just biased to SPSS because that's what I have the most experience in. Good question. Thanks. Okay, with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. Real quick, did I convince you guys today that it's like a good resource, or are you kind of on the fence? What do you think?
I'm 100% convinced.
I already use it. That doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean as much. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming today, guys. If you want to reach out for the syntax file, go ahead and jot down my email and shoot me an email. You can also, I'm totally fine with you guys emailing me questions if you have specific syntax things that you need. I can help you set up things because it's just a passion of mine and I want to help people wherever I can. And it's fun to have new problems too. It's exciting. It's like a puzzle. So that's all fun. Okay, I think that's it. Yay. I'm going to make sure that, cheers. Thanks, Gemma. Okay, I think I'm going to stop this now. Okay, bye everyone on Zoom. This is so interesting doing the hybrid.